Hello everyone, today we are taking a look at the FireFly 1S Nano Baby. They've made some changes again. This is, as you may have seen earlier this week, the version 1.2. So the obvious changes are they've switched out the props and they have a new canopy that kind of protects our VTX. They also increased the thickness of the carbon fiber, and then they made some changes to the frame. Now, if you remember the original video, which I will try to remember to link down in the video description, the original, which I still have here, I should mention they switched from PH20 to GNB27 as well. Hopefully you can see that. They went on the original. It seemed to be the design was about getting as much flight time as possible. And without changing the board or really too many of the electronic components, they've gone to something that's with just simple extra props and a little bit more throughput on the battery connector. We have something that performs quite a bit better, but also we don't get quite as much flight time. It's not really designed around the extreme flight time. If you remember, I think on a 450 milliamp battery on the original, I got around 7 minutes, and I got nearly 9 or 10 minutes on like a 720 milliamp battery. On the original as well. I didn't do any flight time testing on this one. I was just testing its performance. I was fortunate. I caught 3 days of decent weather. 2 of them were actually pretty good. One of them was a little bitter, a little cold. Fingers didn't work very well, but we have some flights that we can take a look at, and we probably should start with getting down to the desk, take a finer look at some of the changes that they did make. So in both cases, I'm running Resellers. You can see the little receiver with the cube antenna right there by the canopy there. Also, these are props that are different. Obviously, we got bi-blades on the left and tri-blades on the right. This does mean that you have more energy used when spinning props. Whenever you add blades or you add prop weight, it requires a little bit more energy. But because we have more blades, we also tend to get more performance, more thrust. As long as the motor can handle spinning the props effectively, that is. Camera's still the same as well, and the canopy design. This canopy design, there seems to be a little notch inside here where the antenna wire will kind of click in there. Now, I don't know if it's a placebo effect, but I kind of felt like I got a little better reception when I just kind of let that come out to the one side. So if you have one, you may want to test just kind of popping that out to the side in order to be able to maybe get a touch more reception. One of the things that concerned me about the original was how close the connector was to the carbon. And, you know, our connectors have a ground in them, and oftentimes our frames are grounded as well. In this particular case, I had been doing some testing to see if I could improve the reception. I added some electrical tape down here. I did not find a discernible difference in my testing originally with this. You may have seen that video as well. So you don't necessarily need to do that, although, you know, it's not going to hurt you much. The frame thickness we'll have to get to in the weight. Also notice the difference in the frame design. We can now toilet tank our batteries if we wanted to, because we have these notches at the front and the rear, so we don't just have to go with the traditional battery mounting style. I was going to take this off, but after prying on it for a while, I was concerned I was going to tear the print. So I ended up sticking with it in traditional battery style mounting, but they do have these little hooks. Especially if you use rubber bands, it'd be a lot easier, that you can use to toilet tank your battery. I like toilet tanking my battery. It feels a little bit different in the air. It's kind of hard to explain. It feels like it rolls a little bit better. Also, you might notice this tape here on the left, on the original, on the motor wires, getting those down onto the arms. I can't remember if I did that or if that was original. So yeah, you might want to look at the product website to see if they show that. I don't see it on the current pictures, but I'm also looking at old pictures. They don't show the new props. And as I mentioned previously, we have a new connector, GNB27 versus PH20. This is a rolled pin connector. We know over time these connectors tend to break down and their throughput isn't as good, and you start to get more battery resistance, and therefore your flight time and performance comes down. GNB27 is much better, although I have seen here most recently where GNB27 connectors aren't always perfect, to where I had one recently that you had to plug, if you plug the battery in all the way, you seated it all the way, that it wouldn't power up, but if you pulled it out slightly, then it would. It was one battery that I had in the series of batteries that I was flying, so that one particular battery I have seemed to have a little bit of a variance in the connector. Frame thickness is also different. You could probably see that a little bit, but we'll get the calipers out and we'll measure the difference. So the original has a carbon fiber thickness of about 1.43 on my calipers. We oftentimes will just say 1.5. And this one is slightly thicker at 1.49, so this one's truly 1.5. So the original weighs just under 22 grams on my scale. And the new 1.2 version weighs 23.5 grams on my scale. So I mentioned I had a nice day, but it's not a perfect day for something this light to be flying it around. I've got a little bit of wind. You can probably hear the leaves that are left on the trees and the shrubs around that are kind of rustling around. So I do have a fair wind. The weather data was 43 degrees and 9 miles per hour on the wind. Of course, we're fairly protected behind the fence and the housing, so not all that wind is hitting the quad, and I thought it handled it just fine. It was pretty rare when those gusts would come up where I would feel it kind of blow me off course. Specifically at one point in time, I was doing some close proximity around the swing set, and I could feel it kind of shifting me as I wasn't flying quite as fast. So that's something to note about these in general. And you could probably tell right away if you saw the original video, the motor response, the thrust response, how quickly you can do little punches or bigger punches up and how quickly you can turn around. It's improved with these props, which is a nice thing, but you are going to lose a little bit of that flight time. You, of course, yourself, you can go back to bi-blades. The tune on both of these is identical. I thought the tune was better for tri-blades, actually. So you can go better to bi-blades and you'll have what you saw in my original video and the nearly the same flight time. We have a little bit more weight with the new canopy, and we have a little bit more weight in the battery strap, as well as the extra carbon fiber. It's not a lot, but it could make a difference of, say, 10 to 15 seconds, maybe even as much as 30 seconds in one of those extreme long eco flights. But I thought this was more fun, it's more my style, but of course, all of our styles, all of our fun kind of varies. You're probably noticing the flags, the painting on the ground, and the sticks. Yes, I did hit those sticks a few times. I am not accustomed to where they are located in my flying path, and I can show you some of those crashes when I get back to the desk. But yeah, so we're getting a pool. It's supposed to have started clear back in November. It hasn't started yet, of course, but we're getting closer. We've got 2 trees we have to remove, unfortunately. Those 2 trees at the end of the porch or the patio there, we got to take those down yet, so I'm going to lose my kind of fun little through and then turn around flippy-doppy thing. But, I'll have new things to fly around, and I'll figure out a fun way to enjoy the backyard still, because I don't have any plans on doing any traveling to flying. It's honestly just not very viable with my schedule. Having an hour to fly is a pretty good lump of time for me, and having a full hour to fly is usually on the weekends unless I'm taking a little bit of time off of work. So I'll figure it out. We'll figure out how to have fun in the new backyard as it comes around, although I'm sure there'll be some flying videos coming up shortly where the yard is just a complete and total mess. I am flying a 450 milliamp 1S FlyWoo battery. I've recently obtained some FlyWoo batteries. I kind of like the FlyWoo batteries because they have a longer battery lead on them, so that gives me a little bit of extra flexibility when it comes to these really short battery leads on the quads themselves, like this quad does have. I did mention that the PID tune is the same, so there isn't anything to change if you want to go from one prop to another, but I think it's more well-tuned for the tri-blade, oddly enough. So I'm kind of wondering if they switched props kind of as a last-minute thing originally when this product launched versus, I would think that because the tune flies well this way, that would have just included these props get-go, but they didn't. Here we come. We're going to land our flight here eventually, and we're going to come in at a flight time of 3 minutes and 32 seconds as our battery on the lower left recovers to above 3.5 volts, which is really close to where I land. I try to nail it at 3.5 volts exactly, but this one's going to creep back up just a touch over 3.5 volts, but it's negligible. I can live with that. So as I show you a few of those crashes where I hit those sticks and maybe a few other crashes that I had out while I was having fun with this, I just have some questions for you. What do you think of the changes they made? What do you think of the flight performance? Maybe you need to go back and watch the original, and I'll try to remember to link that down in the video description down below, and then you can do maybe a comparison and let me know what you think. How many of you are using GNB27 connectors? I know I've had a lot of discussions about better PH20 connections, which is generally solid pin, but we've had these around for a while. We're seeing more battery manufacturers adopt the GNB27. We also have the BT20, which some people have taken to. Unfortunately, to my knowledge, there's only 2 battery manufacturers that have taken on the BT20, and one of them is the creator of the BT20 in Beta FPV, and the other is the FlyWoo batteries, which I don't know if they have had troubles with their stock recently. I haven't checked on those batteries. But so anyways, we have 2 obviously better connectors for 1S flight, which is GNB27 and BT20. Some people like to go straight to XT30, which is viable, but on something this light, it's going to add a touch more weight. But, you know, what do you think of the design changes? Now, I have heard of some people having some troubles with cameras, and I'm not sure if it's from front impact or if it's from top impact where the camera is being driven down into the board or into the front mount. I'm just not certain of that because you can see it does kind of move around. I would think the camera wouldn't be coming in contact with the all-in-one. I would think that it would be most likely the camera getting hit, maybe knocking a little bit of the components on the PCB against that front mount possibly, or we're just hitting the camera in the front and we're killing the cameras that way. Now sometimes, as long as the camera's intact and we haven't broken anything, we can refocus those if they get blurry. It's a tedious process. It's oftentimes a 50-50 shot. I've refocused a couple of these cameras and I've broken a few of these cameras trying to refocus them. So it's something you can take on. If it's already too blurry to fly, it's probably worth a shot. So that's the one thing I've been hearing about with the original, that cameras were being broken. I actually haven't heard that much about the frame being broken, but maybe that was some feedback that FlyWoo got, so they decided to go with slightly thicker carbon. It doesn't look to me like their design changed all that much. Well, I guess if you look at it, the arm layout has changed. That's something I did not notice. The arm layout is much more traditional X on the new version versus it was more of a dead cat style on the old version. So that's a bit of a surprise to me. What do you think of that? I didn't notice the props in view when I was flying, so maybe that's fine. Are you guys breaking these arms? Are you breaking the body of the plate anywhere? They're still got countersunk screws, so they're nice and flush and flat on the bottom. I would probably long-term use some small rubber bands to get my batteries in there. This works fine. It's nice and tight. It's a little bit fussy, especially in the cold when it's not flexible, in order to be able to get my batteries in there very well. But you know, it does work. I can't complain about it not working. It's also worth mentioning that as far as my typical review, you know, oftentimes I'll get 30 to 50, maybe more flights before I have a review. In this particular case with this revision, I probably only have somewhere in the 20s of flights. I had, like I said, I had 3 days. 2 of those days I spent a good chunk of time out flying. 1 day was kind of cold, so I would fly like 2 packs, and I'd come back inside and warm up, and I'd go back outside and fly 2 packs. But the other 2 days were, you know, above 40 degrees, so I could hang out outside a lot longer. So I have 2 takeaways that I kind of took from this. One is what I mentioned in the previous FlyWoo video, is that FlyWoo is taking some feedback from somewhere, whether it's direct customer support or somewhere else on the internet. Maybe they're going through comments on YouTube channels, I'm not certain. And they're making changes to their quads, which I think is a good thing. But because this one is changed relatively dramatically, now that I've finally noticed there at the end of the video that the arm has changed, the arm layout has changed, that could be a change that some of you might not want. The extra weight, you know, we can always go back to bi-blade props and get a lot of flight time back. Of course, the tune is going to kind of return to that bobbly sort of tune and wind that, you know, I experienced originally. But if flight time's your goal, it's an easy way of getting it without making a whole lot of changes, and you'll get what I had in the video. I'm not certain about how necessary this was, but again, you know, I wasn't having any problems with the original. Maybe other people were breaking the ends of the antenna off or something. Maybe. I do have a little bit of concern about this canopy design and having the USB port kind of integrated in it, because every time the canopy shifts, the USB port, because it's all connected to that, could possibly shift, and over a series of crashes, a lot of crashes, it could loosen that USB port up, or maybe even possibly, depending upon the severity of the crashes, maybe even break it off. I fly in the backyard. I fly, you know, 90% of that space is grass. So if I hit something hard, it's usually going to land in the grass. It generally doesn't come down on the cement patio. So all of our crashes are different. So that's something to consider. But I do like the fact that FlyWoo is taking feedback from somewhere and they're making changes, whether those changes are something that you need or changes that you definitely wanted and you've been hollering at them about. Let me know. If you do have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comment section below. I really appreciate your time. And thanks for watching.